I'm going to share with you the story of a family that got ripped off by their financial advisor. In this case, it was on a 529 plan, but unfortunately, the stuff that comes up here is very common, and it happens not just with 529 plans, but all different kinds of investments. Now, this family lives in New York, and that's important because as New York taxpayers, they could have had up to $10,000 a year in state tax deductions when they contribute that much or more, which they were doing, to a New York 529 plan. At the same time, New York has two 529 plans, one of which is awesome. It's the Direct Sold plan by Vanguard, and it has some of the lowest expense ratios in the country. It currently charges 0.15%. Awesome. So when they told me they were in a Main Advisor Sold plan, the Main Client Select series, I had some questions. They weren't really clear on why they were in this plan, so I helped them write an email to their financial advisor asking. This is what we got back. We did indeed consider both options, and the conclusion was that the investment options available under the Main plan were significantly superior to the New York plan. Okay, so I'm skeptical already because I could tell from looking at the Main disclosures that it was a high cost plan. Most of the investment choices had expense ratios of nearly 1% all the way up to over 2%. Many of them had charges when you put money in as well. And so to think that he's picking actively managed funds that are going to outperform enough to make up that difference between those high expense ratios and the Vanguard plan at 0.15% is a very, very tall order. And performance stats and academic research show that the vast majority of actively managed funds do not outperform their benchmarks. But, let's keep an open mind. The plan offers the largest available amount of investment options from a wide variety of investment managers. Like, who gives a shit? Seriously, what you care about is quality, not quantity. If I told you, hey, there's a barrel of rotten apples over there, why don't you go pick out a snack? That's not helpful. The fact that there's a bunch of them doesn't mean that anything there is good. That allows us to better diversify our investment holdings, and the difference in expected return over time should more than offset the tax deduction. Wow, now this guy is getting borderline ridiculous in his claims. The idea that these actively managed funds he's picking are going to outperform enough to offset the nearly 1 to 2% difference in expenses and make up for that missed out on tax deduction is a ridiculously tall order. That tax deduction for most families contributing to a 529 plan is worth about 6 to 9% depending on your tax bracket. So by not getting that tax deduction, you're basically starting in the hole by another 6 to 9%. And he's saying these funds he's chosen are going to outperform so much that they will offset that. I'm not buying what this dude is saying. We structure our 529 plan investments to avoid the occurrence of a major drawdown, such as what occurred in 2008. All right, so this is classic. Invoking vague references to scary stuff and then claiming to protect against it. Very classic when someone's not really doing their job. One last thing to note is that if you do move from New York, they can demand back the tax deduction. That's just false. He's just wrong about that. The only time that New York would demand back the tax deduction is if you do what's called a non-qualified withdrawal, meaning that you take the money out of the New York 529 plan, but don't spend it on approved educational expenses. Now, there's no reason that you have to do that, even if you do move. If this family moved, they could just leave the money in the New York 529 plan, let it grow, and use the money when their kids are going to college. This guy's just full of it. So we wrote back and requested the analysis that he had done to support these incredibly bold claims. Because as much as I knew that the facts were massively against him being right about any of these assertions, I would have been delighted to be proven wrong. If he had done some fantastic analysis and uncovered this just amazing portfolio for this family, I would have been more than happy to review that and realize that this guy was in fact doing a great job. You might not be surprised to learn that that did not happen. In fact, this guy produced zero analysis to support these bold claims. He did come back with a bunch of vague comments filled with jargon, none of it substantive if you actually know what you're looking for. So I said, you know what, proof's in the pudding, let's just look at what's in the account. So we looked at the 4 funds that this advisor had put the family in. Out of a menu of over 50 investment choices, he had picked 3 of the 5 most expensive equity funds and the most expensive bond fund. And you could tell from looking at their performance that this portfolio had not come anywhere close to outperforming its benchmark, much less outperforming its benchmark and making up for the missed out on tax deduction. This family was just getting dinged left and right on these high fees and these underperforming actively managed funds. Additionally, this guy had put this family in the type of shares that would maximize his own personal compensation. There was another type of shares he could have chosen that would have been more appropriate for this family's long-term time horizon, but nope, he didn't do that. He picked the type of shares that would pay the most to him. So wrong. And this family was clearly really disappointed. And you know how there are those different stages of grief, and denial is one of them? They went through phases like that and said things like, as we were kind of discovering this guy's wrongdoing, they were like, oh, well, he's very religious. He has kids of his own. And we just kept learning more and more bad things about what this guy was doing. And the truth is that none of those kind of qualitative or personal factors matter unless the person is actually putting you first and making choices about your money that reflect good faith effort and competence. And unfortunately, this guy just had neither. So I share that story as a cautionary tale because it's unfortunately all too common. And I think it's good for you to know that that's the kind of stuff that's out there. So come on over to aboveboardfinancial.com and learn about what's up so you can make good decisions for your family that you'll be proud of for the long term, and get back to doing all the other stuff that you would rather be spending your time on.